Once again, please wait for the microphone and raise your hand. The first question is from Steve Gelbs.
David, obviously, especially coming off yesterday, there's a lot of talk about the number of walks that you guys have given up this season. As you look at it, why do you think that has been such an issue overall?
I think whenever you have struggles like that in a particular area of team, it's not one issue. It's probably a variety of things, at times trying to be a little bit too perfect. Probably at times losing track of situation in the game. And look, at times it's that 50-50 call that's not going your way. Regardless of the reasons, we can't walk that many guys. You can't consistently win baseball games with that many free passes. We know that. We've been working to address it, but we need to be better.
All that being said, as bad as the walks have been, you guys have done a really good job at limiting hits and striking guys out. What is the balance and your philosophy when it comes to maybe throwing pitches that are going to be more borderline to get that swing and miss, while also, sometimes risking the walks going up the way they are?
I think we get back to where we are in the game, where we are in a count, who the hitter up there is. We can't take the same approach for every hitter. There are hitters who can do damage. There are particular points in the game where damage is going to be a little bit more costly. And there are other points in the games where we can get a lot more aggressive and ensure that we're not putting hitters on without them earning it.
Bill?
Talk about addressing the problem with the walks. How do you address the problem?
Well, I think we've been working on it all year, and we still need to get better. And it's partly a recognition and a continued emphasis with all of our pitchers and catchers, and then it's execution. We got to go out and execute our pitches, throw strikes at a better clip than we've done recently.
Everyone talks about the nibbling and whatnot. What about the framing from the catchers? Has that been a problem?
I don't think so. I think that's an area where we've done pretty well and probably improved a little bit over the course of the season as the season's gone along.
Manny?
I realize that we're in the middle of August, but we're not going to see you again until September. So the issue of September call-ups, do you see someone like Brandon Sproat, potentially maybe even Lusanga Lacuna, who's been doing pretty well in AAA, maybe getting an opportunity up here?
I don't think I'd take anything off the table at this point. I think September call-ups is a little bit of a different animal now than it was a couple of years ago. It's a two-player expansion, one position player, one pitcher, so it's not quite as robust as it was, and really those calls are going to be made by what the team need is at that particular point in time, and clearly your roster isn't frozen in September, so it's highly likely that whoever we call up on September 1st, those positions could rotate as we get through the month of September.
And also on Mark Vientos, just how would you evaluate his season in terms of his defensive ability at third base, and also what he's done at the plate?
What has continued to, I think, be great to see from Mark is the adjustments he's been able to make throughout the season, and that's on both sides of the ball. He came in and went to AAA with an emphasis on defense, and he's been able to improve that. And I think offensively, we've seen continued growth and adjustments as he's understanding how major league pitchers are going to attack him. Mark's still a very young player. He's not going to be perfect. We don't expect him to be perfect. But this continued progress that we've seen this year is very encouraging.
Laura?
Where is Kodai Senga in his recovery, and what's the level of optimism that were you guys to make it to the playoffs that he'd be a factor?
He's still going through sort of the initial stages of the recovery. The good news is, because it's a lower body injury, he's able to keep his arm going. But we haven't done any upright throwing yet. We're still kind of in immobilized throwing. So I can't answer the question of the likelihood that he'd be ready to go in October. I think we really need to get him upright and throwing, see how his arm responds, and then we got a little bit of a better understanding of where this is headed.
Do you have an idea when that might be, or the timeline for something like that?
Certainly hope over the next week to 10 days.
Will?
Hey, David, I think you guys are somewhat under 500 since the trade deadline, whether it's like 5 or 8, 5 or 9, something like that. What has stood out to you besides the walks as to like why you guys have struggled?
I think we've played very inconsistent baseball, and that's, yes, the walks have been too much. We went through a stretch where we weren't getting hits with runners in scoring position on the past road trip. We ran into some really good pitching, probably expanded the zone a little bit too much in some of those games. So it's been a combination of things. I believe in this roster right now. I think we've got a roster that works of talented players. We've demonstrated that. And we know to get to the playoffs, we're going to have to play better than we've done over this recent stretch.
Abby?
When it comes to Senga's injury, did you guys find any reason for maybe why that happened? Was he, I don't know, maybe focusing on too much in his rehab from the shoulder thing? I'm just curious if there was anything that you guys found when you looked at the injury.
No, I mean, I think unfortunately this is a freak lower body injury from a pitcher. Unfortunately, I have no reason why this occurred.
Anthony?
David, what do you think of this 6-inning thing for starting pitchers that's come out in the last few days? And had you heard any chatter on the grapevine to that before it was reported?
Yeah, I mean, initiatives like this have been contemplated and talked about and discussed at various industry meetings over the past few years. I am all for continuing to discuss and ultimately implementing ways where we can both enhance the importance of starting pitching in our game and hopefully limit the injuries of starting pitchers in our game. I think we are a long way away from completely implementing something as drastic as a 6-inning rule. I think there are probably iterations we need to go through and testing we need to go through, and then ultimately developmental time we need to go through. But I think all of these types of discussions, whether it's an innings minimum, a batter face minimum, pitch number minimum, whatever it is, I think are worthy discussions. And we've shown as an industry we can implement what seemingly is drastic change, and it makes our game better. And so I think we should take that and be encouraged to continue to try to make our game better.
Tim?
On 40-man call-ups and with a pitcher like Sproat in particular, how much of a factor is kind of the 40-man clock that he doesn't need to be put on the 40-man this winter? Does that factor into whether you'd want to call him up for just a short amount of time?
I think all of those types of extraneous factors play a part in a call-up decision at any point. The most important factor is what is the right fit for both the player and our major league team. But yes, roster constraints, roster crunches, roster numbers, all of that is going to play a factor in the decisions we make.
And then with Vientos this season, how much does that alter, if at all, kind of how you view third base long-term for the organization?
I think Mark has done a very nice job solidifying himself as a major league player, and he's improved defensively to the point where we're running him out there regularly at third base, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. And I think for now, I'm focused on this year, and then as we get into the off season, we'll evaluate what future years look like.
Mark?
Another Sproat one. Just big picture, what have you thought about his season, and what more do you want to see from him?
I think he's had about as good a minor league season as you can possibly have. I think he's thrown more strikes. He's rounded out his arsenal. He's improved his changeup. I mean, he's competed at a very high level, very consistently. He's bounced back from the occasional rough outing. So we've been very pleased with his development this year. He just needs experience. Like this is still a very new player to professional baseball, and he has moved very rapidly through our system, and he has earned that, and he deserves that. But I think we need to make sure that he also dominates the level he's at now before we really start talking about what comes next.
Jerry?
With some of your starting pitchers on pace for their biggest workloads in years, and David and Paul coming back from missing a lot of time this year, how concerned are you with the durability of the next several weeks, and as well as the depth you have here and at AAA in case a need arises?
You're always concerned about durability, and you're always concerned about whether you have enough depth in starting pitching. I will say, I think our medical staff, our strength and conditioning staff, has done a really good job with all these guys. They are monitored regularly, and we haven't seen anything of concern at this point. Doesn't mean something won't pop up, but I think we're in a pretty good spot at this moment.
Will?
David, what kind of reports have you gotten from AAA about Brett Baty's defense at second base? You've had him there almost regularly at this point.
Yeah, he's worked really hard there, and I think he has improved steadily to the point where he's playing a pretty good second base.
You consider him now like a guy with that kind of multi-position?
Yes.
Lloyd?
I noticed at the trade deadline, maybe with the exception of the San Diego Padres, the sexy Baseball America top prospects basically stayed put. Is that the way you see the industry going because economics? That kind of raised eyebrow. That seems like I heard there a prospect hugging or,
Yeah, and I know that's gotten a lot of play. I might look at that a little bit differently, that the quality of player that was traded this deadline or wasn't traded may have dictated the type of prospect return that was provided. I think if certain players who were discussed were ultimately traded, there would have been massive prospect hauls with many, not only top 100 but top 50 players traded to try to secure those players.
So it's not the economics of the industry that's changing.
I don't think so.
Manny?
Just to go back to Sproat real quick, you mentioned he's still relatively new, which he is. His first season in the minor leagues pro ball. Is there any hesitancy to maybe call him up in September because of that?
So here's what I'll say on Sproat. Right now he's a AAA player. At the point where he's not a AAA player, I will be happy to sit up here and talk about him. For the moment, he's a AAA player.
And just recently, some reports have indicated some scout turnover. How do you plan on filling that role? And also, how do you view, what's your stance on scouting versus analytics and data?
So on the first part of that question, by policy, our policy, I don't comment on internal personnel changes or moves. In terms of the role of scouting in our operation, it's immensely important. We have a very large scouting staff. We will continue to have a very large scouting staff. Our scouts in various aspects of our operation inform our decisions on a daily basis, and will continue to do so.
Dan?
David, we talked to Carlos yesterday about Scott. I know he's just playing catch right now. Is it too soon to know when he might be back or what a timetable might be?
Yeah, it is. The catch play has gone well, which is good, but until we really get to the point where we're nearing getting off a mound, it's tough for us to map out any sort of progression and then game protocol, and we're not there yet.
Good. Thank you, David.
Thank you.